Hey there, fisionados. Kevin here from N.O.A.H, Northern Ontario Aquarium Hobby. It's been a while since I did a video for you, so it's been a busy summer. I'm trying to get back into it. Anyways, I decided to do a little video today on my top 5 low-tech plants. Alright, so for the sake of discussion today here in this video, I'm going to be using the term low-tech in the way I defined it in an earlier video, but also in the way that it's typically defined on the Facebook groups and other forums. Low-tech simply meaning that it's not using any injected CO2. So, lighting can still be fancy, substrate can still be fancy, filters can still be fancy, or, anywhere in between. But at least for the sake of this discussion, we're talking about low-tech, meaning not adding injected CO2. So again, with that, I want people to sort of consider something here. A little bit of a disclaimer, I guess, in this. Low-tech, as we know, aside from just being not having CO2 injection, it covers a really wide range of tank types, from a very basic aquarium gravel up to using commercial aqua soils like fluval stratum or ADA Amazonia or something like that. Now everywhere in between. Now something I want to point out when I'm doing this, because a lot of people will do these sort of top 5 easy plant videos. I'm not necessarily saying that these are easy plants, except they actually are, but even in a low-tech situation, you want to make sure that you've got adequate lighting, an adequate substrate, and adequate fertilization. As long as you have these 3 things going in a low-tech situation, you're going to see good growth. And as I've said in other videos, yes, you can get growth from some of the simplest substrates and leanest fertilizer dosing, but it comes down to that question of what's considered healthy growth, what's considered optimal growth. Now, in a non-CO2 injected tank, you're rarely going to see what can ever be considered optimal growth, just because, of course, CO2 and a good fertilizer dosing regimen really boosts that line between just healthy growth and optimal growth. But so the plants I'm going to be talking about here today, you're going to be able to see healthy growth as long as you've got, like I said, adequate lighting, adequate substrate, and adequate fertilization. Now again, to clarify, when I say adequate substrate, if you go back and watch my videos on substrate, you'll understand that something like just sand or traditional aquarium gravel, they're very suboptimal. They're not really adequate. They've got 0 nutrient content, 0 CEC, which again I explained in that other video. Go check that out. And even with fertilizer supplementation, they're not specifically suited for seeing really good healthy growth. Yes, you can, and yes, people have, but again, I'm talking about what's adequate. So I'm talking about using something that's a little bit more designed to be a planted substrate, even if it's something inert that has a relatively good CEC like fluorite or EcoComplete. Of course, you're going to see much better results with a nutrient-rich substrate like fluval stratum or ADA Amazonia. And there is something to be said again for doing a dirted tank, organic dirt on the sublayer capped with something like sand or something like that. However, that's never one of my go-tos, simply because it's very limiting and it's not easy to move plants around. You have to be careful with it so as not to build up anaerobic pockets and bacteria and everything. So again, when I'm talking about adequate substrate, I'm really talking about something that's designed commercially, maybe to be used as a planted substrate. And when I talk about adequate fertilization, I'm talking about something that's going to give your plant a complete nutrient base. There's a lot of different commercial fertilizers out there in the market. I'm going to break this down again in another video. You know, but there's there's a lot of discussion and controversy and misinformation about, say, things like the necessity for root tabs. Again, I'm going to save that for another video. But so when I talk about adequate fertilization, I'm talking about a regular fertilizing dosing regime, something that's going to, a regimen, something that's going to give you a good dose of microferts and a good dose of macroferts. And again, I'll break that stuff down for us in another video about fertilization, but I'm not talking about, you know, really limited, like, okay, only dosing macros or only dosing micros or only dosing iron or something like that. I'm talking about a really well-rounded fertilization, and it makes a huge difference in the plant growth flight. Now, I'm not talking about having to go full up EI level dosing or anything like that. You can dose relatively lean, but as long as you're providing all of the nutrients that plants need, even lean dosing, you're going to see some of that healthy growth. Something that's going to, you know, give adequate nutrients to your plants. And again, for adequate lighting, you want something that is going to be ranging from the low to medium range of par. And I talked about this again in another one of my videos, so again, I'll put the link up there. But, you know, if you've got the tiniest light that doesn't have a good penetration, doesn't have a good spectrum, no, even these low-tech plants are not going to do well for you. And that's the thing, you know, a lot of times, and I've said this before, you know, don't blame the hammer, blame the carpenter. A lot of people will sometimes try to grow these plants that I'm about to mention, and, you know, one or more of these three just base adequacies are missing, and the plants suffer and struggle, and so they say, well, no, you know, this isn't a really good plant for low tech. It's not a good starter plant or something like that, but they really can be, as long as you understand the basic foundations that are needed. Adequate lighting, adequate fertilization, adequate planted substrate. Now, with these top 5 that I'm going to put out there, this isn't just based on my experience. This is based on a lot of other people's experience. In fact, these are some of the plants that I give as trimmings or suggest to people starting out, you know, that are coming to me for advice, because they can really give a nice impact in your tank. And again, as long as you have those 3 adequacies in place, then they're quite easy to work with. There's a friend of mine, a fellow YouTuber, Mike and Sierra over at Aqua Nut. You know, they started off into the planted tank hobby with limited success, and they admit it. You know, but they saw what their errors were. You know, they sort of leapt into it without sort of providing those adequacies and everything. But once they took some advice from myself and some other people, you know, and got those, at least those base adequacies in place, the plants that I'm about to suggest are the ones they used, and they had great success with it. And I mean, as you can see in the tank that I'm posting here, you know, they actually managed to grow versus the one that I showed a moment ago, where, you know, they were struggling. So enough with the preamble. Most of the plants I'm going to talk about are actually in this tank behind me. Now, forgive the look of this tank. It's looking a little bit raggedy. It was getting really overgrown, so I did a massive hack back last week, actually. So it is looking a little bit rough. It hasn't fully, you know, bounced back yet in spots, but you can see the plants that I'm talking about appear in this tank behind me. And I mean, I'll post some pictures here, but so you can get a little bit better close-up of them. But they're all something I've got growing back here. Now, one thing that I'm going to make sure to do when I'm talking about these plants is use binomial nomenclature. It's a fancy way of basically saying the scientific name, you know, because there can be a lot of confusion out there on the forums and in the hobby about, you know, people saying, oh, this is baby tears, or, you know, this is whatever. Anyways, and they'll use a common name, but there's so many common names applied to so many different plants that are similar that it gets really confusing. So When dealing with plants, I prefer to use the more scientific name, the binomial nomenclature designation, which will give us, generally the genus and species of it, and then sometimes the variety. So I'll post those up here as well, and down in the comments below. You can look them up and you can use whatever common names you want, but at least by understanding the proper name, it'll be a lot easier for you to search for more information on these plants or to suggest these plants to other people. Alright, so in no particular order, the number one plant that I've got here is Stargunpens. Now, some people call it Stargunpens, some people call it Stargunpens. I just say Stargunpens. I'm not exactly sure how it's pronounced, but that's the way I pronounce it. Anyway, Stargunpens, which again, photo up here, but appears down here in the tank as well. It comes from the southern Amazon area of Brazil. It's a nice, sort of generally short growing plant. You're looking between maybe 5 to 10 centimeters tall, 3 to 4 centimeters wide, give or take. But it's a nice compact, sort of bushy plant. It is a stem plant, really nice thick stem. It can carpet well, now not in the same way, that something like HC Cuba would or Monte Carlo would. There I go, not using the binomial, but you can get a really nice, dense, sort of bush hedge-like carpet out of Stargunpens by keeping it trimmed nice and tight. Now, this is again one of the things with having adequate lighting, is that if you've got too low of lighting, it can tend to grow leggy, and the node space will grow between the leaves, and it doesn't look quite as nice. But with adequate lighting, and again, it doesn't have to be highlighting. I don't have highlighting on this tank behind me. It will help keep it compact. Now, you can allow it to grow up a little bit taller if you want a bit of a bushier look, or you can trim it off and keep it down really low. Very hardy plant, actually. Doesn't really require much. Of course, any of these plants I mentioned are going to do better with CO2 and better with a little bit stronger lighting. But again, in a low-tech tank with no CO2 and the basic adequacies that I mentioned, Stargunpens is really nice and works really well as a framing plant in front of driftwood or rocks and sort of playing in between, because that's sort of how it grows in nature, coming down through some of the Brazilian foothills. It comes down through the rocks and you'll see it sticking up there, so it's well suited for that sort of a look. Next up, we've got Hydracuddle Tripartia Japan, SP Japan. Again, picture will be here, but this is it growing in the tank. The thing that I've done that sort of arbor with. I love that plant. It is very hardy. It grows like a weed. It can be invasive in your tank and spread like mad, but again, as long as you're doing your maintenance and you keep shaping and trimming it, you can keep it under control. It's from Southeast Asia, and it's hard to describe it this way because it is very viney, but I mean, it can grow 5 to 10 centimeters tall. It can be taller than that and bushier because, the different vines, strands, the runners can sort of overlay each other and create a really nice voluminous look. It can be used as a carpeting plant as well, which is nice. You just, as it's growing up and moving towards the light, or just growing up, you can grab those runners and sort of put them down into the substrate, and they will slowly spread out and create a nice sort of clover-like effect. I prefer to use it in a nice sort of bushy fashion just because, it fills out really nice and really, really easily. Again, quite a hardy plant. It definitely will stay more compact if you have a slightly brighter light, better power, better spectrum in there, but even without, it will still grow, and it just takes a little bit more sort of shaping of folding those vines in to keep it looking bushy, even in a slightly less than adequate light situation. One of my favorite mosses to use, which is the next one, is Taxophyllum spiky. Spiky moss, as you know, it's best described maybe sort of like as like a big brother to Christmas moss. It has that very sort of pine, coniferous look to it. You know, very sort of triangular growth in the fronds, if you will, of it. It's fairly easy to maintain. It doesn't really seem to go as wild as, say, Java fern and look as messy. You know, and it doesn't require quite as much lighting to keep its shape and to keep a nice look about it as, say, something like flame moss or even Christmas moss, which can be difficult for some people. It really just fills in spaces so nicely and can create a really nice green bushy area. I think we can see a little bit of it behind me there. In this corner here, you know, just big and bushy. Shrimp absolutely love it. And again, picture up here, fast growing. It does tend to catch detritus and you know, plant trimmings and stuff quite a bit. So you just give it a shake out. You know, and it's really easy to trim down. You can always just grab individual fronds and pick them out and move them other places. But it fills in fast, and I like it. It's just a really nice, dense looking bushy moss that can take up a lot of real estate fairly quickly. You know, each individual frond can be anywhere from you know, 2 to 10 centimeters or even longer if you let it go. Again, like anything, as long as you're giving it slightly better lighting, slightly better fertilization. It doesn't necessarily need the substrate per se, because again, you can tie it or glue it to rock and driftwood, and it will just balloon up from there. It's one of my all-time favorite mosses to work with for filling in big areas quickly and giving a nice sort of old growth forest look in parts. Next, I've got Heterantera zostrifolia. It's a great name, actually. I've got some of it growing back here. I've got it in a few tanks. This stuff grows like a weed. The common name that you are probably used to in this case, I will say, is called stargrass, because it does look very much like a star-shaped growth. It puts out side shoots like crazy. It grows up tall like crazy. Again, with adequate lighting, it will keep the node length tighter, you know, and so it does have a bushier appearance to it. This, again, you can trim really low and let it side shoot out, and gives you a nice, again, carpeting effect or low bush effect, or you can let it sort of grow up really tall and stemmy, you know, and it really pushes up and fills up an area fast, and can be turned into a both planted and floating plant, and sort of sitting there. And if you let it sort of float there long enough at the surface with the tops of it, it'll eventually develop some cool little sort of bluish white flowers. But it does grow very bushy fairly quickly. It'll be one that you'll find you have to keep trimming back. And again, it works in a lot of different tank situations. But again, the better the lighting, the better the fertilization, the more healthy, optimal growth you're going to see. And to the point, you want to definitely be trimming it as regularly as you can, just to keep its shape, because it will really grow wild on you. And also, as it gets thicker near the top, again, it will definitely shade out the bottom leaves and the bottom stems, and those can rot off and die. So as I've shown in some of the trimming videos, you know, you can either just cut off the top to keep the shape low and replant those tops, you know, or you can cut the tops off and pull out any of the leggy bottoms and plant it down low. And again, it really just, I like using it on the sides of tanks and in the back, because it really does sort of fill up and give a nice bushy look when you're doing like a nature style aquarium. Number 5 on our list here is Bulbitis Gulati. I really don't know if I'm saying that last part right. I think so. But anyways, it's the most common Bulbitis. Another fairly common one is Hydracuddle. But the Gulati, I think that's the way you say it. If not, I love saying it. It sounds like I'm yodeling. Anyways, as I said, one of the more common Bulbitis, otherwise known as African fern. It's rhizome based, like your Java fern is, but it has a much more fern-like appearance than Java ferns, sort of sword-like appearance. I think I've got a little bit of it back in here, and again, picture up there in front of it. It, of course, does like any rhizome, rhizome plant, you don't want to be burying the rhizome in the substrate. You want to be attaching it to stone or driftwood. I personally find it does better attached to driftwood because it has really tendril-like root base that comes out, and it holds on tight. You know, and you can propagate it the same way by splitting it off. But I just find it grows much bushier and much faster than Java fern in the right conditions. And again, in this low-tech situation, I'm just talking about, again, those basic 3 adequacies. You know, Java fern you can really abuse and it'll still do okay. Again, it won't look quite as healthy, but it'll do okay and put on new growth. Bulbitis will stay fairly spindly if you're not treating it well, but again, if you have those basic adequacies, like I mentioned, it really bushes out and gives this really nice firm look. And again, it can get quite tall, like as high as 40 plus centimeters in the right conditions, and fill out quite nicely. The bit that I have in there, I took off another tank because it was just, it's overgrowing. I've got to trim that tank out again because the bulbitis specifically is just taking over the tank. Again, medium lighting does much better, and adequate fertilization, you're going to see it. But again, it's nice as a background plant, or even as a focal plant, as I use it in this tank of mine, because it's got such an interesting leaf shape, you know, that it looks really nice. It looks really nice. In my opinion, it stands as a better substitute to some of the more exotic Java fern. All right, so that was the top 5 of my favorite low-tech aquarium plants. So again, we had the bulbitis, we had the spiky moss, we had the Stargunpens, we had the Heterantera zosterofolia, and we had the Hydracuddle tripartia Japan. Again, as I said, you know, it's about what you want to do and what you want to achieve. Just, you have to consider the parameters realistically for what you expect to achieve. You know, if you, I don't like to say it this way, but you know, oftentimes you'll see someone say, it's growing, hey, look at this plant, it's growing great in this situation, and it's really not. You know, there is a difference between a struggling and surviving plant and a healthy growing plant, as much as there is between a healthy growth plant and an optimal growth plant. And what we're talking about when we're doing low-tech situation, and once again, all these plants that I mentioned work really well in high-tech as well, and of course they'll benefit from that CO2, from the higher fertilization and some of the higher lighting. But I mean, I'm going to talk about CO2 and lighting again in another video, but they work really well in a high-tech situation as well. But so in a low-tech, again, it's not about just making plants survive. You know, I know when we start off, that is a nice goal. It's like, I just don't want to kill it. But giving your plants at least basic adequacies, you know, will allow you not to just not kill the plant, but to actually grow a plant. And new growth doesn't necessarily always mean healthy growth. So again, we're talking about giving like a healthy growing plant, something that's not in danger of dying, it's not looking spindly, it's not suffering from any potential deficiencies. So keeping those basic 3 adequacies, and I think maybe I'll revisit those adequacies again in another video as well. So again, try these plants. I love them, you know, give them a shot. Provide them with what they need, and I think you're going to really like using them. I use them in a lot of tanks over and over, just because, you know, one, they're so easy to deal with, but I also just love the look of these plants. There's so many more, and I'll do other videos on, you know, more top 5s, but these are my absolute go-tos when it comes to especially low tech. So again, any questions and comments, please fire them down below. Don't be afraid, you know, approach me on the forums if you see them. If you like my videos, do hit that subscribe down there. The channel is growing fast and furious, so thank you very much. But hit that subscribe, and share these, post these videos on your fish forums. If you find them helpful, I'm really glad. Again, questions, comments down below. I do my best to answer them as quickly as I can and to try and help you out to where you may need. So please, just try some of these plants. Keep working in this hobby. Keep loving this hobby. Dive right in.